everybody, welcome to this webinar. Today we're going to introduce ROSA to you guys. So it's called Meet ROSA. Our event, this webinar, will be joint venture by AWS, Red Hat and Conclusion to give you an introduction into OpenShift on AWS with a business introduction from AWS and Red Hat and a more technical demo at the second part of this introduction. But first, let's see who is our guest speakers today. Joining us today, that's Jeroen Schinkel from Red Hat, Ike Arias from AWS, and Jitse Klomp from Conclusion. Hello everybody, nice that you're here. Welcome. Everybody will do their part today. If you have any questions at home, just ask them in the YouTube chat, and we'll try to answer them during the presentation. And at the end of the webinar, we also have a part for questions and answers. So let's see what we're going to talk about today. We're going to start with why we're here. Of course, it's nice to have a new service and OpenShift, but why are we talking about this subject and why is it even relevant in the world of today? So we're going to start with that. After that, AWS and Red Hat are going to do an introduction to ROSA. So how is it set up within the AWS ecosystem? How is the partnership between AWS and Red Hat? After that, we're going to go a little bit more on the business side of the use cases and the business impact ROSA can have for your organization and how you can use it. After that, we have a 15-minute technical demo on how you can set up your first ROSA cluster on AWS. And we'll talk about a little bit how you get started after you started the cluster and how you get your first workloads on ROSA on AWS. So our first part, of course, this is powered by Conclusion, which is hosting this event in the studio in Utrecht. But of course, we're really happy to have Red Hat and AWS as our partners here today to help us launch the new service, ROSA, on AWS. So the first question, why are we here? So the why, the how, and the what. So where does ROSA fit in your business needs? Or maybe more important, how can ROSA help your organization in the cloud transition journey? I think a lot of organizations, and we also see that Inclusion, are struggling with this question. How can the cloud help us as an organization move further and continue to grow? So it's really important for every organization to start with the cloud journey. So why are you making this cloud journey? Different organizations have different needs and different reasons to go to the public cloud and have their make a transition to new technologies to support the business. It could be to accelerate growth. So for scaling purposes, but also modernizing your IT to be more flexible in what you do and what you get, and also managing your IT cost in a better way. So be more flexible. Pay per use is also a really important part of the public cloud. So you can really pay for what you're using instead of making big investments. The world, as we know today, is changed a lot and changed quickly. So it's really important to be flexible and agile in our new environment. See the COVID crisis we have now. There are a lot of companies, also clients of ours, who need to switch their business models really quickly. And the public cloud can help you do that transition and be more flexible in that. But it could also be to enable compliancy. Doing that all yourself is a lot of work and costs a lot of money. So if you can use public cloud providers as AWS, you can benefit from their expertise and those parts. I already talked about be more agile and flexible, so meeting your customers' demand, which is also really important. Make sure you stay on top of the game and be better than your competitors in the market. It can also help streamline business processes, but also get new opportunities, because the public cloud providers like AWS use a lot of research and development money and create new services like ROSA. You can use that as an advantage for your own organization. So how can you do that as an organization? It's really important that you start by defining your own cloud strategy. So using the why to how you're going to do that and how you're going to transition to the cloud and use those advantages. It's not only a technical journey you're making, but also for your organization. There's a whole change in mindset and culture you need within your organization to benefit from all the new services with AWS. Be more flexible also means that your organization needs to be more flexible, but also changing your knowledge within your organization, having the right people doing the right jobs. The more you automate, the more you need to have people who can also continue to grow with what AWS and other public cloud providers provide as a service. After that, you also need to create a technical roadmap. A lot of companies are migrating or moving away from legacy software or legacy systems. It's really important to make sure that you know as an organization on what you're going to do and what parts you want to migrate, lift and shift, transform to new technologies like maybe OpenShift. And in that choice, of course, the technology stack is really important. Where are you going to build your new application environments? You have a lot of choice these days on a service. You have IaaS, infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, software as a service, functions as a service, containers as a service. You have a lot of things as a service, but it's really important that you choose the right model for the right business that you are transforming. So if you have more legacy systems and you need those legacy systems still working, then infrastructure as a structure is a more sensible way to move those, lift and shift those to the cloud. But if you going to modernize your application environment, you can choose container as a service like OpenShift or function as a service more in the serverless services from AWS. Again, also looking at where these systems are. A lot of our customers at the conclusion are moving away from on-premise and going to private or public cloud or combinations of both. There's a lot of time in the transition while you're moving your applications and modernizing your applications where you have a multi-cloud or a hybrid cloud situation. Also, ROSA and other services like from AWS can help you transition those, make that transition easier. Of course, we're here for OpenShift on AWS, a container orchestration tool, which really helps you modernizing your application stack. And for that, we're going to deep dive into ROSA now. So I'm going to switch over to Ike. Ike will join us from New York, and we'll give you all an introduction on ROSA on AWS. So Ike, welcome.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much for having me. Yes, I'm joining from New York, but good afternoon and good evening to everyone who's watching this now. I'm Ike Arias. I am with AWS Container Services. And AWS Container Services is really a subset of the larger AWS compute portfolio, which is obviously a subset itself of the much larger AWS services portfolio. And today we're going to talk about ROSA. So ROSA fits in a stack of container services. This table here tries to organize these in a way that maybe can help you understand where everything fits. And we believe that ROSA is kind of in this management layer, which we traditionally have had ECS and EKS for basically the container orchestration layer, how you deploy and how you manage, scale, and secure your containers at scale. So let's go through the three options here really, really quick. Historically, AWS has had ECS, and we call this, for very, very briefly, we call it powerful simplicity. EKS is a managed Kubernetes service. We call that open flexibility. And now we have ROSA, which is an opinionated container platform, as we'll see in a minute. So ECS really is how AWS started with containers at scale. And ECS is just a natural way for our customers, for AWS customers, to orchestrate containers by leveraging a lot of what they already know on the AWS stack. So if they already are familiar with load balancers and VPCs, et cetera, ECS is a great fit for that, which is in the next slide. Then a few years ago, Kubernetes started really going mainstream. A lot of people really got very excited with what was happening in the open source community with Kubernetes. And our customers asked us to create a managed version of that. That's what EKS is. And a month and a half ago, we launched ROSA. ROSA is a managed OpenShift service. And it's really a way that we believe our customers are going to be very excited to use if they are OpenShift customers or they want to become OpenShift customers. It's a really great way to get started. It's an easy way to get started. As we'll see in a minute, it has some benefits over the previous options that our customers had for running OpenShift on the platform. when they're using ECS or EKS, they have to kind of put together their own platform. They really have to connect the orchestrator with a whole bunch of other tooling that have features around monitoring and log aggregation and developer tooling. How do you build your software and how you deploy it onto the platform? There's a lot of flexibility there, but there's also the additional engineering task of putting it together. There are some templates and things that can make it easier, but it's still the responsibility of each customer or their partners to help them put this together. OpenShift has a different approach. OpenShift is a vertically integrated container platform that really encompasses all of these things in one out-of-the-box package. So if you look at OpenShift in a similar diagram like this one, you'll see that all of these tools are already pre-integrated. And there are very few decisions that you need to make to get up and running. You can literally deploy an OpenShift cluster and hit the ground running and start deploying containers and applications in a containerized format. So historically, OpenShift has been an option for AWS customers. They have had the option of running OpenShift on AWS. Red Hat offers a supported version of OpenShift. It's called OpenShift Container Platform, or OCP for short. And this is where customers can install OpenShift on their own. They have EC2 instances, the virtual machines onto which they deploy this. There's an installer script and there's automation around it, but the customer is responsible for the installation of the platform and for the care and feeding of the platform moving forward, meaning making sure it's up and running. If there's any downtime in any of the nodes, they have to recover it or at least help monitor that. And they're also responsible for the upgrades. For a few years, Red Hat has been offering a fully managed version of OpenShift, whereas the customer no longer has to install and run and maintain the platform. They only consume it. However, the way in which this is running is slightly different from OCP. So in OCP, the customers run it on their own account, so they fully control the platform. OpenShift Dedicated has been a slightly more restrictive option because it runs on Red Hat's own accounts, and the customer has a bit of a more limited view into the platform itself. And also, it still requires the customers to engage with Red Hat as a separate vendor to establish this contract for them for the licenses and the support, et cetera. And customers were really coming to Red Hat and to AWS saying, we would like a more cloudy option for running OpenShift on AWS. We really want to get started real quick, and we would also like more flexibility. And that's why we introduced ROSA. And we're very excited for this option because we believe it's the easiest, best, and most cost-effective way of running OpenShift on AWS. So the following reasons are, I think, are really the more salient points for ROSA. Number one is that it's very easy to get started. If you are, or anybody is a customer of AWS, there is a console page that is new, and it allows you to activate OpenShift on that account. And you can start a ROSA cluster, which is a fully managed version of OpenShift on that account, without necessarily having to go to anyone else. So just like anything else on AWS, you click a button, you're up and running after a few steps on your own. You don't need to talk to Red Hat or anyone else as a separate vendor. And obviously, if you're being helped by a partner, the partner can do this on your behalf. And you're up and running within 30, 40 minutes with a fully managed cluster. So it's super convenient to get started. You can activate it on any account or multiple accounts. The other new benefit, the other new feature in the ROSA model is how customers pay for it. So again, traditionally, you've had a contract. It's usually a year, 3 years. You have a term for the contract, et cetera. With ROSA, you have a pay-as-you-go option or a consumption-based pricing, which allows you to use ROSA as you need it and only pay for what you're using. So if you use a cluster for testing or you're running a pilot, you can stand up a ROSA cluster and use it for a couple of weeks and then tear it down, and you're only paying for those couple of weeks. So that's a new way of paying for OpenShift, which we think our customers are really going to like. And by the way you pay for it is in a unified bill with AWS at the end of the month. So just like you pay for the infrastructure piece, the EC2 instances for running the cluster, you will also see in that same bill the support and fees for ROSA, so it's only a unified bill. And then the third new, I guess, change or big change is how you get support for OpenShift on AWS. So if you're running a ROSA cluster, you can open a support ticket with AWS Enterprise Support, and they will handle all of the support needs for you, including any kind of escalations that may be needed to go up to the Red Hat team, the SRE teams that are managing this. So it's a really easy way to get started, to pay for and to get support for OpenShift on AWS. And just as important as what ROSA brings to the table, it's also important to understand what it doesn't change. And what it doesn't change is the platform itself. The technology is still OpenShift. It's the same Red Hat OpenShift that you run if you were running OCP or if you're running dedicated. It's the same version, same code base, etc. So you're not going to miss out on any features. And in fact, this fourth column on the right, you may actually gain some flexibility or some speed in integrating other AWS services or AWS tools that you may have. You can also do that with OCP, but obviously you have to do that yourself. But we expect that with ROSA, over time, there will be additional integrations with AWS services and tools and processes that will allow you to really get started super quickly and integrate with anything else that you're already running on AWS. ROSA is now integrated directly into the AWS console. So if you go to your AWS console and you go under the section of container services, you will now see an additional option there for ROSA. It's very easy to get started. As you see in the screenshot, there's a orange button that says enable, and you click on that and you're off to the races. There is an installation instructions. You'll see in a few minutes actually a demo of how this works. There's a very small command line tool that you download and you follow the instructions. And again, in a few minutes, you should have a fully functioning OpenShift cluster. So once that cluster is up and running and it's fully deployed onto the account, what does that look like? Well, it actually looks very similar to an OpenShift cluster that you would install yourselves with OCP. It'll have a set of master nodes, and those are 3 masters. You can actually install OpenShift in ROSA. You can install in 2 modes, what's called a multi-AZ mode or a single AZ mode. Most customers are probably going to choose the multi-AZ mode for high availability reasons. And in that mode, you're going to have the 3 masters, and you're going to have also 3 infrastructure nodes to run things like ingress and monitoring tools, etc. And then as you'll see on the right side of this diagram, that's where you have the worker nodes or the compute nodes. That's the data plane of the cluster, and that's the part that you fully control in terms of how many of those nodes you're going to need and what types of nodes you're going to need. But in general, this is basically a picture that you would do yourself if you're running OCP. But in this case, everything is fully managed. And I know there's going to be a Q&A, an option for people to ask questions. So if this is not clear, we can address it then. But all of these nodes are fully managed. So not only the control plane and the infrastructure nodes, but even the worker nodes are fully managed, meaning that the life cycle of those nodes, any patching that's necessary in the operating system and restarts, all of that is part of it, including upgrades as well. So I think this is where we transition to our next speaker. So I will stop for now, and I'll talk to you in a bit.
Thanks, Ike. Well, thanks for the introduction of ROSA. I'm glad that OpenShift is now fully available on AWS. So I'm looking forward to also inform more customers about the great joint partnership that we have established. But it's very good that we provide some technical solutions towards the marketplace, but it's always very important to focus on what is the real business value. And what I see with customers is that they sometimes are struggling of easier access to innovation. Well, with OpenShift on AWS, all the innovation, all the capabilities are there for use. So it's really, OpenShift is really to empower developers to drive business innovation, to really stand up for the business requirements and make new services quicker available in the marketplace. But also allows the combination is not to focus to any IT or other productivity that you need for maintain a container platform. With the fully managed option, you only have to focus on the business outcome instead of all the operational elements that are normally needs to take care of. And of course, it allows you to experience in a very fast way. Experience of how does container really help your business. We see that all these emerging technologies is available, but how do you really successfully adopt those emerging technologies? I think with the help of Conclusion, they can guide your customers of you for a full hybrid cloud environment. So taking into account your application landscape, what you currently have, and which one of those are available for fully cloud native. So you see that technology is one thing, but mainly you also have to focus is, do we as an organization are ready to adopt and embrace this new technology? Now with the OpenShift fully managed available on AWS, you don't have to worry about all the side elements of start innovation again. I think with the combination of Conclusion, well, they can guide you through this journey. So I'm looking forward to be part of your cloud journey, and together with AWS and Red Hat, we make it successful. So again, I think the nice conclusion of this is, well, you can use OpenShift fully embedded in the AWS services. It's really the most easy way to start innovation. Give access to the developing toolings that are available both on AWS integrated with OpenShift. And of course, with AWS, you have many options. So don't start, or don't wait, but start using OpenShift in order to bring innovation to your marketplace.
Okay. Thanks, Jeroen. Thank you, Jeroen, and thank you, Ike. Next up, we'll dive a little bit in how ROSA can help you support your digital transformation. So we already discussed more the technical point of view and why you want to continue this journey, but now from a more business part, how can it help you support those transitions, those digital transitions? With us is Jitse from Conclusion X-Force, and he will talk a little bit about how ROSA can help you in this transformation to modernize your own application environment. So, Jitse?
Yes. So Jeroen and I mentioned quite a couple of more technical aspects about ROSA and how those aspects can support your innovation and digital transformation journey. I will elaborate on quite a few of those points even more to really show you how ROSA, well, really OpenShift, but ROSA especially can support a broader digital transformation strategy. As we see it, your digital transformation should start by simplifying your infrastructure, simplifying your application management layers, simplifying like the most aspects of your software delivery process. So we see ROSA as a great solution for this to really enable both development and operations team to make the most out of the technology that's on offer. So one of the most important aspects of simplifying your well, infrastructure, application delivery, really boils down to 3 points. Simplicity, obviously, consistency and security. And so how do we simplify your application landscape using or leveraging ROSA? As Ike and Jeroen mentioned, ROSA is a fully managed offering from both AWS and Red Hat. So everything about ROSA is fully automated and supported. Most of the operations within OpenShift are automated already using the operator framework and all very cool technologies, but actually consuming ROSA as a managed service really enhances that. And when you're using ROSA as Ike as I mentioned, sorry, it really is OpenShift. I spun up an OpenShift cluster using ROSA yesterday. It took 30 minutes to provision all the infrastructure. Running the installation script was 30 seconds, 30 minutes to provision everything. And I could reuse basically all my existing automation tools from my on-site or my code-ready containers OpenShift cluster in the public cloud. So reusing automation capabilities and all the automation tooling you already have in the public cloud on ROSA or even on OpenShift on the edge, it really is a benefit. The same really goes for consistency, because when you're running OpenShift everywhere, you have the same Kubernetes-based operating environment for all your workloads, running identical development, operations workflow, lifecycle management workflows. It really enables both your development and operations team to focus on the more important parts of software delivery or even business transformation, creating value instead of keeping the lights on. One other very important benefit of running OpenShift and ROSA is embedded security and compliance. The ROSA offering is both PCI DSS and ISO 27001 certified. So you get certifications, security certifications for free, basically, when you provision your own infrastructure, your own OpenShift cluster. You're on your own. There's quite a lot of stuff you need to do to really get those certifications. So using simplicity and consistency really enables the security aspect as well. All the auditing and logging is centralized, and it all boils down to simplifying every aspect of your infrastructure using automation and the same foundational technologies like OpenShift, whether you're on the public cloud, your own infrastructure, your own data centers, or OpenShift on the edge. So I mentioned simplicity. OpenShift is really simple, but you get quite a lot of stuff. All these blocks you see from the Linux host OS all the way up to multi-cluster management, it's all integrated. It's all the same stuff, whether you're running on the public cloud, on your own infrastructure, or on the edge, it's all the same. So it's very simple. Even though managing your own OpenShift infrastructure, your own OpenShift cluster is complex, complicated, using ROSA really simplifies everything for you. You just have to push a button to provision your entire cluster using a standardized architecture. So simplifying every aspect of your infrastructure, of your software delivery process, really enables you to accelerate your business through standardized building blocks for operations and development, etc. So I actually have a couple of instruments named on one of the next sheets. As I mentioned, simplifying your application landscape and infrastructure enables quite a lot of benefits you can further use to accelerate, like self-service. When all your infrastructure and all your services are standardized, simplified, you can enable development teams, operations team to provision their own infrastructure, provision their own services, provision their own runtime environments. Enabling a lot of abstraction, and abstraction really enables developers and operations teams to focus on combining existing building blocks and adding new business value through not having to worry about all the boilerplate administration stuff, boilerplate certification stuff, boilerplate compliance stuff. It's all the same. So using all the standardized technologies, using the standardized runtime environments enables you to accelerate anyway, there's quite a lot of simplification, and the development teams can, oh, sorry. I mentioned the flexibility. It really enables development teams and business teams to focus on adding value, enabling collaboration between teams. When all the teams and all your developers are using the same technology, they have the same vocabulary in which they can communicate about their software, their building blocks, increasing collaboration. So you can really speed up your development processes and really shorten the time to market needed from an idea for your business until that idea is running in production on a fully supported OpenShift cluster. And also, after you have accelerated through standardized technology, leveraging the power of AWS and OpenShift, and even more standardization, it's really easy to scale your infrastructure and your code with your business, according to your business needs. You can enjoy hyperscale advantages from AWS by leveraging zero effort, on-demand scaling. OpenShift supports auto-scaling, so whenever your app or your software is being used more in production, AWS or OpenShift scales your cluster, again, without any effort from operations teams. And you can pay as you go, as Ike mentioned. All the infrastructure is pay as you go. You can scale up your cluster, scale down your cluster without planning, basically. Same goes for enabling new types of workloads. You can spin up a cluster using some kind of machine type. You can spin up new machine pools within your same OpenShift cluster, enabling new hardware advantages like GPU accelerated computing, etc., etc. And you can leverage all the new AWS services as soon as they hit GA from the same environment as your OpenShift cluster. One other very important aspect of running ROSA in production is you can simplify and streamline your cloud spending. As Ike mentioned, ROSA uses unified billing, so all the infrastructure and OpenShift subscription costs you use are running in AWS. So you can use your pre-allocated budgets, AWS budgets, pre-committed spend, all your AWS contracts, you can use exactly the same billing structure for basically everything. And OpenShift includes quite a lot of metering, instrumentation, so you can actually bill your development teams or your operations teams according to what they use in their cluster.
Okay. Thanks, Jitse, for this nice introduction on what it can do for your operations. We have a question from the audience. Jeroen van der Pol asked, can you also deploy it with CloudFormation instead of clicking a button? So maybe Ike or Jitse can answer that question.
Yeah, I'm happy to answer that question. So when you click the button, what you're really doing is you are enabling the ROSA metering and billing on the account. You're actually not deploying the cluster. Deploying the cluster requires the running of a command line tool. So it's not yet compatible with CloudFormation, but we are working with Red Hat on having that option as well. For now, it has to be either manually triggered through this command line tool, or it can be also scripted or automated, but it does require the use of this ROSA command line tool. It's an open source project. It's on GitHub. You can take a look at it whenever you want. It's a fairly simple and small binary that you can download for Windows, for Mac, or for Linux. And it allows you to pass in arguments to do it in a non-interactive mode, or you can just invoke the command in interactive mode and then just answer some prompts to get it done. For now, that is the way that you install a ROSA cluster, but in the future, we will support template-based deployments.
Thanks, Ike, for that clear answer. I think in the demo we also see a few of those things in the practice. So we'll go to that next. Jitse, you talked about what the business value is for ROSA. Do you also see that with current clients where you work in the real life situation? This is all very theoretical. It's nice marketing words to say it like that. But where do you see the business value really in the day-to-day operations?
Yeah, so we actually see quite a lot of clients struggling with really fragmented application landscape, running legacy applications on mainframes or AS400 boxes. And at the same time, development teams want to run their new Java Quarkus frameworks in the public cloud. So it's really fragmented. You have all these old legacy software and mostly old legacy processes in the same organization or even within the same teams that also do more cloud native development. And we really see the value in standardizing on a single target platform. We'll talk about migration and really implementing migration strategy at the end of this webinar. But we really see the value in simplifying basically all the development tools and workflows and consolidating on a single operating environment. Yeah,
so it's a good tool to run together, right, during the migration. I think we'll talk about it a little bit later. Jeroen, also from the Red Hat point of view, where do you see most value in the combination of AWS and Red Hat in this? We already discussed some points, but do you have also clients or companies that ask you specific questions where ROSA really fits the bill?
No, I think it all fits into what we see around this, because a lot of buzzword bingo words are used currently. Definitely. But also you also have a great opportunity by leveraging AWS with OpenShift to get access to do new ways of developing applications to make sure that you deliver what you promise to your end customers. And what you normally see is that cloud has been there for years and years. We enable organizations to have a consistent experience both on-premise as in the public cloud with AWS. But you also have to bear in mind that customers, it's not always easy to say, well, we have some legacy application, you want to have, you mentioned already that it is a fragmented world. So how do you get a guided approach towards application modernization? I think it's not as easy as some people will think. On the other hand, you want to innovate, and on the other hand, you want to optimize your existing infrastructure. I think with the fully managed solution that we currently have with OpenShift on AWS allows at least to experience also with this new technology, like microservices-based applications, API-centric applications, and containers that can run everywhere. So I think it's the time to market that really is, in my opinion, is the biggest business value that you can by leveraging ROSA. But I think I want to also give you advice to make sure, you mentioned already, have a clear cloud strategy, but also make sure that your organization is ready to adopt this kind of new emerging technology. Yeah. And I think we both all have examples, and we can help all customers to make those several smaller steps to embrace cloud in the right way.
Yeah. Yeah, I discussed a little bit about the mindset and the culture, which also needs to change for this Absolutely. Sort of new technology to land in an organization. Do you see this as a more proof of concept type of thing, where organization can start prototyping using new technology, greenfield things? How do you see that with our customers?
In the context of ROSA specifically, I think ROSA really fits all of those use cases. It's very easy to spin up a new cluster, hook up your existing CI infrastructure, your same build infrastructure, and then you're suddenly running your software on a fully supported, production-ready OpenShift cluster in the public cloud. And as it's all in the public cloud and all the billing is unified, et cetera, it's very easy to throw away your cluster again. So you can try out ROSA, try out OpenShift, use it as a proof of concept, sure. Most of the times you really want to start over when your proof of concept is finished, but ROSA is actually fully managed and fully supported. So it's a real agile way of spinning up a production-ready environment and keeping that environment after you're done with your proof of concept, because it is a fully managed production-ready service.
Okay, nice. Sounds like a good solution for that. Ike, I have a question for you from the audience. We have Ragnar asked if ROSA supports Windows workloads.
Yeah, not at this moment, but it will in the near future. So we're working on quick follows, and Red Hat is working on a few things. I don't think we'll have time today to go over the roadmap, but we have a working roadmap over the next few months. I would say 12 to 18 months. A few of them will be out earlier. So even now this summer, we're already launching some quick follows that many of our customers who have already embraced ROSA have been asking for. So Windows workloads, I imagine, will maybe not in the summer, but it will probably be one of the next few features, I guess. Another one, for example, is GPU instances are not currently supported, but they will be in the near future. So yeah, unfortunately, the answer is no today, but hopefully very soon.
Hopefully very soon. That sounds like a good answer. Ike mentioned GPU workloads. What are the opportunities that clients can use that different kinds of instances for?
So yeah, when GPU support lands in ROSA, you will be able to add those capabilities to an existing ROSA cluster. So provisioning a new machine pool to schedule your GPU accelerated workloads on. Some of the use cases for that are data analytics, machine learning, etc. And really for organizations who want to have a data-centric way of working, or really enable their business through leveraging data and analytics, it will be very easy to schedule those workloads onto ROSA or onto OpenShift in AWS, especially combined with all the data storage capabilities and the near infinite scalability opportunities within AWS.
Near infinite, yeah. Yeah, nice, okay. Okay, good to hear. Okay, up next is a little technical demo from our site. This will be a video, which will introduce on how you can launch a ROSA cluster on AWS. I think Ike already mentioned some part of it, more the command line structure for that after you enable it on your AWS console. So let's start the demo. And after that, if you have any questions, still ask them in the YouTube chat. We'll try to answer them during the webinar. If there are too many questions, we will answer them afterwards. So let's start the demo for now.
This is a demo of the Red Hat OpenShift on AWS or ROSA service. Let me start with the CLI, which is called ROSA. It's written in Golang, and the code's available on GitHub. The command line is available for Windows and Mac, and it's also available for Linux, which is what I'll be using for this demo. So let's begin. Here are the options available within the ROSA CLI today. Your typical create, read, update, delete operations, as well as helper commands like whoami and init. So starting with ROSA whoami, here you can see which AWS account you're logged in with, as well as that you're also logged into OpenShift Cluster Manager, which provides a number of the backing services for this offering. The ROSA CLI uses the default configured AWS profile, or you can specify a profile by passing --profile option to any of the ROSA commands. We also support passing credentials via environment variables like the AWS CLI. After making sure you've got your credentials configured, the next step is to run the init command. So ROSA init. While that's running, the init command bundles together several validation steps to make sure you can deploy a ROSA cluster into your existing AWS account. It validates credentials, checks for any SCP policies that may block deployment, checks for necessary permissions and quota. It also runs some dry runs of instance creates to make sure everything is all squared away. As you may know, quotas per region, and ROSA uses a default region if one is in your AWS config file. So in my case, it validated US East 2 because that's my default. If you plan to deploy to a different region, you can change your default, or you can pass /region to the ROSA init command. So speaking of the regions, I can list them out here. And these are the same list that's supported by the OpenShift container platform product. So 16 regions now, and if new regions are added to the OpenShift product, they will follow along into the ROSA service. Also, as I kind of skipped over this, but one part of the init command is verifying whether the OpenShift command line tool is available. So what is the OpenShift command line tool? That's a client similar to kubectl that helps you interact with your OpenShift cluster. I've actually already got it installed on this workstation, but we have a helper command to download the client. ROSA download OC, it pulls down the latest client for the operating system that you're running on, and yeah, you'd have to unpack it to install it. So I've got that installed already, and let's just make sure that it is, yep, and it's the latest version, which as of the time of this recording is 4.6.4. So that OC client package also includes kubectl along with some OpenShift specific add-ons. So let's actually try and create a cluster now. So ROSA create cluster, and let me run through the help options really quickly. So there's a lot here. It's quite customizable actually. But instead of creating a mile-long command line argument, we have a helper option called interactive mode. So what this will do is it'll lead me through kind of a wizard for standing up my cluster, along with offering me some inline help if I'm not sure what a particular option might mean. So my first question is the cluster name. Let's call it JEater ROSA. And next question, multiple availability zones. So what this will do is it will deploy the control plane nodes and worker pools spread across 3 availability zones. And that's our best practices for any production deployment. So I will choose yes here. If you didn't choose yes, it would deploy everything in the same AZ. Which is fine from an OpenShift redundancy standpoint, but doesn't give you that multi-AZ redundancy, which are best practices. So choose yes for that. And then if you remember the list region command I ran earlier, this is the corresponding list of regions. And my default was US East 2, but I don't know. Let's put it somewhere else. How about EU Central 1? And then it's asking me for what version of OpenShift I want to deploy. So let me see here. I can choose, I'll choose the latest one right now, 463. And let's see, now it's giving me a question about the instance types. So these are for the compute nodes, not for the control plane master nodes. In this case, it doesn't really matter too much. I'll choose M5 2X large for those. Minimum of 3 compute nodes. It's going to put 1 in each availability zone, so I'll just leave that by default to 3. And then there's some networking questions which come into play when you're trying to deploy, basically when you're trying to connect your network. If you wanted to peer into the VPC that this cluster is deployed into, you may have some subnetting requirements there. I'll skip those for now. And let me just zoom in for a second on this last question. So we've gotten a lot of customer demand for making clusters private, meaning they're not accessible over the internet. And that's what this option is here. So if you deployed a cluster as private, you would it would deploy just fine, obviously, but you would not be able to access the API or the web console until you establish that VPC connection, that peering connection into the VPC. So I'll leave it this one as public for now. And it's going to go off and create this cluster for me. Okay, cool. So yeah, the output here is the cluster name, an internal ID for it, tells me which AWS account it was provisioned into, the topology of the cluster, the region, and here's a field called state. So we do several pre-flight steps before actually beginning the cluster deployment. One of them is preparing the AWS account. We also allocate a Route 53 DNS zone for the cluster, and we're preparing that with all of the scaffolding. And okay, so that is the cluster that's currently being deployed. The rest of these fields will be filled in as the cluster is deployed. So what'll happen after those pre-flights is the OpenShift installer will get kicked off, and if you had a need to look at the logs of the actual installer, we plumb those through as well, and they may not be immediately available. Yeah, because our pre-flight steps are still running. Within a couple of minutes after the installation kicks off, you'll see debug level logs there if you ever needed them. So that install is going to take, it's going to churn away for a bit. I have a cluster that I've previously installed. So let me show that now. And if I do list clusters, I've got, so this JEater ROSA 1 is in a state of installing, and then I've got JEater reInvent, which is ready, and that cluster's been up for a bit now. Let me show you what it looks like if I were to describe that. Okay, so this one has all of the fields filled in, including console URL and a details page. So let's start with the console URL. And I've got that pulled up over here. Let's see. So this is the console of the cluster that I had previously installed. This is the standard OpenShift overview page. You have access to Operator Hub, and there's just dozens or even hundreds of optional pieces of software, ISV software that you could potentially install. We have also some dashboards about the cluster, this particular cluster itself. This one is about etcd. We also have cluster-wide resource utilization dashboards, which tend to come in handy. And we also have, there's plenty in here, some machine sets, and these are the workers and control plane nodes and infrastructure nodes that are part of the default installation. So that is that. What if you're trying to deploy an application that needs more resources or needs different types of nodes, for example? Let me flip back to the CLI, and let's try and add some more resources to this cluster. The way this works is on the concept of machine pools. And let me first list out what we've got. And so there's a default machine pool. That's the M5 2x large that I had chosen during the cluster provisioning. And let's try and add a new machine pool. And I'll do it in interactive mode as well. So we'll give it a name, and let me call it pool 1. Number of replicas. This is the number of nodes that are part of this machine pool. Since I've got a multi-AZ cluster, this will be, I'll need to choose 3 for 3 AZs. And then I can choose the instance type. Let me choose something else. M5X large. And what's happening in the background here is OpenShift is going out to AWS, spinning up the quantity of these instance types that we choose with a certain AMI, and it's going to join it to the cluster. If you wanted to target a workload at this machine pool, you can use a label selector for that. So I can label it, for example, test label equals true, and then every node within this machine pool will get that label. Cool. So let me list the machine pools again. And so those objects were created. You can see pool 1 with 3 replicas of the instance type, M5X large, the label, and so forth. So these were requested, but like I said, it's going off to AWS in the background, and so it's not immediately available to you, but it will in the next couple of minutes become available. So the next step I wanted to show you. So earlier in the ROSA describe output here, we also see this details page, and that is the OpenShift Cluster Manager. So we have, let me pull that up here. So this is the OpenShift console, and then if I pull up the OpenShift Cluster Manager console, you can see I've got the reInvent cluster, which is in ready, and I've got this new cluster which we created today, which is still in installing mode. If I click on the reInvent cluster, which is the one we just created machine pools on, says there's an overview page, resource utilization. You can see the type here is ROSA, provider AWS, and the billing model is through AWS. So you'll receive, your AWS invoice will include the ROSA product. If I pull up this machine pools tab here, you can see pool 1 is here, and I could also let me just add another machine pool to this, and this time maybe, I don't know, R5X large, number of workers per zone, so 1 per zone, so a total of 3, and then the machine pool name, pool 2. If I click add machine pool, it's going to go ahead and do that. So yeah, same thing with the CLI or OpenShift Cluster Manager equivalent operations. If I flip back to the OpenShift console now, and let me click on machine sets, you can see here there are some of these rows have 0, 1. That's pool 1, and then you can see pool 2 here as well. And as those machines come online, they will show up. 1 of 1 will show up here. So yeah, that is what I have for you today. Let me turn it back over to Ike to let you know how you can get started with ROSA. Thanks.
Well, thank you for that, for the tech demo. If you have any questions, just ask them via the YouTube chat. Next up, we're going to deep dive a little bit in more when you have a cluster, how you're going to use it. So Jitse will guide us through a little bit of the getting started and getting your first workloads on the new cluster you just created, and what you need to make sure to plan ahead. So Jitse, to you.
Yeah, thank you. So actually, we're not going to start out with getting started with ROSA. There are a couple of things you need to consider before you get started with ROSA. Some of these aspects are regarding networking, but also scaling and resiliency. Let's first start out with a bit of networking. As you saw in the tech demo, it was really easy to provision a cluster. But there are a couple of things you need to consider, especially regarding private API endpoints or public API endpoints. When you provision your cluster, the Kubernetes API is exposed via an Elastic Load Balancer, and you can choose whether that API is accessible over the internet or only in your own private networks. When you want to use a private endpoint, make sure you don't use overlapping node IP ranges. You'll get in trouble with VPC peering when you use overlapping IP ranges. It is actually possible to switch between private and public after provisioning the cluster, but you really need to consider your IP ranges, or else it won't be possible to pull your API endpoint to a private network using VPC peering. There are other options available like VPNs or transit gateways or even direct connects, but yeah. Take a note before you actually deploy your ROSA cluster. One other thing that was mentioned in the demo is the concept of machine sets and machine scaling, or rather machine set scaling. The scaling of your cluster can be fully automated. Either when you provision your cluster, you tell the ROSA installer your cluster is auto-scaling enabled. So you provision a machine set with a minimum and a maximum amount of worker nodes per instance type. But you can actually change the machine pool after deploying the cluster to enable auto-scaling at a later moment, or even add new machine types and auto-scale those sets. And the final thing you need to consider is actually a bit more complicated. It is regarding availability and resiliency of your cluster. As was mentioned in the demo, there are two options when you deploy ROSA. You either choose a single availability zone or multi AZs when you provision your cluster. You cannot change from a single AZ to a multi-AZ setup after you deploy your cluster. So, as I mentioned before, it is possible to use ROSA as a proof of concept, but when you want to run your production workloads, make sure you provision your cluster in a multi-AZ setup. One other thing is Red Hat offers a service level agreement of 99.95% availability. That's the availability of your Kubernetes API endpoint. So it's not availability of your nodes or even your single master nodes or infra nodes or parts of your infrastructure. That SLA is only for your API endpoint. So when your cluster stops responding and is not able to schedule new workloads or update itself, that's when you're in trouble. So really look into the multi-AZ setup. One other thing about the managed service aspect of things is Red Hat does not commit to any RPO or RTO when it comes to Kubernetes objects and Red Hat managed persistent volumes. So when you run a cluster, there are some stateful workloads like the etcd cluster database component, or even your Kubernetes APIs or some other parts of the infrastructure. They are stateful. Red Hat uses all the relevant AWS tools and endpoints to make backups, snapshots of all the persistent volumes. You can get those backups restored or access those backups, but Red Hat does not commit to any RPO or RTO. And that's only considering their own managed stuff. You are fully responsible for your own data and your own data recovery strategy. So it's really important to look into or plan your persistent storage usage. Use either EBS or EFS. ROSA has a couple of operators built in to provision persistent storage automatically from AWS. So when you create a persistent volume claim or a persistent application, the cluster will provision EBS storage automatically when you enable that feature, of course. So now we can actually move on to getting started with ROSA. There are a couple of things you need to do or consider after you deploy your cluster. One of the things is for operations. Seeing as it is a fully managed service, there's not a lot you need to do or need to consider. But out-of-the-box integration with CloudWatch is possible. You can enable log shipping from your entire cluster, either the infrastructure logging, the application logging, or audit logging, or all three, or a combination within the OpenShift console or in the Red Hat Cloud console. And it's a single push of a button to enable log shipping to CloudWatch. So it really integrates very nicely with a lot of existing tools and alerting tools within AWS. And one other thing is you can schedule automatic platform updates. Red Hat SRE is responsible for the successful rollout of an update. They will even scale your cluster up so your total cluster capacity is always available even when there are updates running. So they will automatically scale your cluster up so there's always enough capacity for your production workloads. And scheduling updates is possible via the Red Hat console, the Red Hat Cloud Console, or via the ROSA CLI. And the next steps for developers are actually pretty easy. When you're an existing Red Hat OpenShift customer, or you already run a lot of Red Hat tools in your portfolio, ROSA really comes with all the bells and whistles attached. Everything you know and love about OpenShift is supported and is supplied with ROSA. So batteries are included, and it's a totally seamless experience for your developers, targeting the same runtime, targeting the same workflows, the same tools, etc., etc. So getting your first application running on ROSA should not be very difficult. As the cluster is provisioned in the public cloud, you always have an internet connection, and you can consume your software artifacts or your build artifacts from within the cluster, or you can execute software builds inside OpenShift using the OpenShift build tools, build configs, Tekton pipelines, etc., etc. So that brings us to migration strategies. As I said, most of it is pretty easy when you're already running OpenShift, but we recognize quite a few scenarios when migrating toward the public cloud or even toward a container platform. There are quite a few options when you're already running on Kubernetes, but application modernization is really where we can help you out, support your business needs, support your software developers, everything from more strategic decision making to the technical implementation of moving to the cloud. So at our customers, we see a kind of a mix between migrating legacy, old style, stateful, monolithic applications toward the cloud, leveraging really standard containerization technologies, building container images containing the legacy software, and then enabling it to run on Kubernetes or other container platforms. But where OpenShift and the added value of ROSA and OpenShift really shines is when you modernize your applications. So when you lift and shift existing applications to the public cloud and then invest time in actually going cloud native, it's not a purely technical discussion. You really need buy-in from all parts of the organization to enable your developers and your operations team to invest time to get to know ROSA, to get to know OpenShift, to get to know cloud-native development methodologies. Yeah. So there are options, a lot of options, and ROSA is just one of the many options, especially when you're already an AWS customer, especially when you're already a Red Hat customer, especially when you consume both OpenShift and AWS but have not combined the two yet. This is really the time to implement ROSA and get started with ROSA right away.
Well, thanks Jitse for this more the technical part of getting started, also planning your migration before you get started on the cluster part. We'll just discuss that a little bit further for what are the possibilities for that. I think the AWS services are more than just ROSA. There is a lot of ecosystem around that. Where do you see the most benefits on which services you can combine with ROSA? How can you leverage more the power of AWS in that? What kind of services do the customers combine? I think Ike is a little bit standstill. Okay, we'll come back to Ike when he's back. Jitse, maybe you can elaborate on that question?
Yeah, definitely. So as I mentioned, ROSA and OpenShift supports stateful workloads, but where the public cloud really shines is in combining other managed services. So when you're running an application that needs a database, it's really very easy to consume a database as a service from within AWS when you're running your application inside AWS.
Yeah. So more combining those services, but also things like machine learning or the data analysis you just talked about.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Okay, that sounds good. Jeroen, Red Hat does more than just OpenShift. I know there's a lot of tools around OpenShift also available from Red Hat, from the advanced cluster management. I think we just saw a little bit of that. Could you elaborate how that combines to this service of ROSA?
First of all, I want to say, I think it's all in the Red Hat open source way of doing business, is that we are an open platform. That means that we work with open standards. So even if customer has their own CI/CD tool and they want to integrate it with OpenShift, that's possible. So we want to leverage and use our ecosystems like we do with AWS. So if there are additional services available on AWS, we can connect, we can integrate that with it. On top of OpenShift is also mentioned above the, let's say, Kubernetes layer, we have a lot of application services available for customers for integration, for business optimization, for using different application languages, etc., etc. So again, I think the OpenShift platform is open and connects exactly to the business needs and also to the technical needs of organizations.
Okay. Good to hear. We do a lot of business together, Red Hat and Conclusion. We go to our customers with this proposition. I think we have a few examples on that for that. But where do you see the most value to combine partners like AWS, Red Hat, and Conclusion to help our customers?
Well, I think Jitse mentioned a very important element of applying technology. You make sure that the whole organization is aligned. Red Hat is a technology company, which we do great based on our open source model, and we want to collaborate using our ecosystems. That means also that sometimes I know that Conclusion has some industry-specific knowledge. Combining that with the technology that we can support specific industry-specific business needs, I think that's where the combination is key, and also to make sure that technology is done the right thing for you as an organization, meaning that you need help in your organization setup to adopt this kind of new technology. I think Conclusion, based on your experience, what you have with your customers, you have a broader view of the technology landscape than sometimes Red Hat has. And I think that's why the combination of Conclusion with Red Hat and AWS makes it a perfect teamwork to help organizations in this cloud and application modernization journey. Yeah,
perfect. Ike, you just were a little bit off from New York, but you're back. I asked a question about combining more services on the AWS part. You have ROSA, which is just a base, your container platform, but you need other services around that to make your applications work, modernize your application platform. Which services do you see combining a lot by our customers in AWS?
Hi. Sorry for that. Technical difficulties, the beauty of live stream. Yeah, the integration with other AWS services is certainly a very important feature of running OpenShift on AWS, and obviously ROSA enables some easier integrations. Now, out of the box today, you can use a couple of options of integrating other services. There's a service broker. We have been working on a general Kubernetes approach, an operator-based approach for a service integration called ACK, or AWS Controllers for Kubernetes. We expect in the near future that will be either immediately integrated into ROSA clusters or at least have a very easy, quick start to it. But in any event, whichever way you're integrating that, The beauty of it is the giant spectrum of options that you have in terms of AI and ML services, the databases, data lakes, etc. So our customers really use a whole bunch of these. It really depends on the kind of workloads that you're doing, and if it's greenfield, you're probably using more like persistent engines, maybe caching services, queues. If you may be doing batch. It's really difficult to say because every customer has a different use case or a different set of use cases and workloads. But I think one of the benefits of ROSA is that you really get started straight onto this incredible range of options in the AWS cloud that are all readily available to you. And the easier we make it for our customers to integrate with those services, the more comfortable they'll feel bringing those into their workloads. So that is really one of the, if you remember that one of the initial slides that I show on the right column, service integrations is really one of the value props here that we think is going to really resonate with customers.
Yeah, thanks for that explanation. Jitse, you talked a little bit about operations and developers. We have now a nice way of working, like DevOps way of working, where you combine more. But we discussed that knowledge is an issue there. So how can we help customers to make that transition, not only to ROSA or the cloud, but also to focus on their business? You talked about pipelines, and it's a nice assumption that our customers are already there. But there are a lot of steps to get there. So how do you see those transitions with our customers?
The solution to that question is more technical, and one other part of the solution is more from an organizational point of view. And it's a bit of a chicken and egg problem. Honestly, you really need business buy-in to accelerate your software development processes, to invest in a new way of working, invest in flexibility. It is not a silver bullet to just click on deploy ROSA to my environment, and now I'm suddenly agile and DevOps and in the public multi-cloud Valhalla. So it really depends on the customer and where the customer is in their own public cloud or rather DevOps or agile journey. There's no one-size-fits-all solution, but we really see technology as a kind of catalyst to enable an organization to actually explore all the more flexible, agile options. And the great thing about OpenShift is an opinionated platform with all the services you think you need, and a lot of services you don't think you need, but you actually need when you're running agile and when you're running in production. So the great value is it's opinionated, and you don't have to reinvent the wheel every time you want to deploy an application to production.
Yeah, so it really makes the start easier for an organization to start with container platforms.
Yeah, it can really kickstart your journey when you don't have to worry about standardizing your platforms or implementing new software development methodologies, when you can just deploy a cluster and suddenly run production workloads on it.
Yeah, okay. It's
it really speeds up the whole process.
Yeah, the chicken egg problem. I think you summarized it in a nice way.
Yeah.
Red Hat, it's your opinionated platform, of course. So you do a lot of training and certification, I think, also for this for OpenShift. We work together with Red Hat to do those trainings and certifications. What can Red Hat do to support Conclusion in helping customers get their knowledge up to date? Jeroen, maybe you can elaborate on that.
Now, of course, I think the combination between Conclusion and ROSA in this case is we can also bring our, let's say, more technical in-depth experience on OpenShift. But also, we are dealing with the Kubernetes for years and years, so we had also to learn what's the best way to approach it to customers. And in that case, I think we can support conclusions in a joint effort with customers to ensure that the start of maybe your first container technology or your cloud native application is done properly, because you want to bring that new way of working in. Also that drives sometimes a different culture and a different mindset of customers. You want to make sure that that's a successful way, and to make sure that also the business get engaged in the early stage. So the combination of the three of us, I think if you reach out to us, we'll make sure that the right steps are being taken. So I'm looking forward to work with customers, discuss what are their business and strategic objectives, and how can we be an enabler to achieve those objectives.
Yeah, okay, perfect. Nice. I think you summarized it nice, so let's finalize this discussion. Thank you all for joining us in this webinar. I hope you learned a lot, and we'll get started with ROSA, Red Hat OpenShift on AWS. Thanks, Ike from New York, for your contribution today, although in the early morning for you. Thank you, Jeroen from Red Hat,
Your pleasure.
supporting our event here. And Jitse, thanks for all your insights on the technical and organization part of this. Thank you all at home for watching. If you have any questions, don't be afraid to ask them also after this webinar. And if you have any organizational questions and you want to discuss anything further, just contact us and we'll get in touch with you. Thank you very much, and I'll see you later.